This is Kosmographia, the Randall Carlson podcast. And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Kosmographia, the Randall Carlson podcast. And we finished up with the firestorms and the intense fires possibly coming from the skies, but we got a little more maybe to go on that, maybe some more about ancient stories and more of the dragon symbols. Right, Randall, is that the direction we're going to take here?
Yeah, the thing you got to understand, Russ, is we will never be through with that story.
Well, that's a good thing, I think.
But we have covered the basics. So enough, I think, for
just the basics.
Yeah.
October 8th happens every year.
Yeah, it does. And it's going to continue. But we dove into that interesting dimension of our history that a lot of folks were not aware of before this. And hopefully now a few more of them will be aware of it and consider it as a realistic possibility. You know, I'm still skeptical. Like, is this even possible? Well, I mean, it's possible, but you know, we got to come up with some kind of an explanation. You know,
you need a mechanism. Yep.
Remember Sagan's dictum about extraordinary claims require extraordinary proofs. Well, there's kind of a variation, I think, on that. When you have extraordinary things, probably require extraordinary explanations. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, how do you explain those things that we covered in those 4 or 5 episodes, whatever it was? But for me, I think one of the things that really dispelled my initial skepticism was the Santa Rosa fire. I mean, when that happened, you know, I was looking at it, and of course I was aware of the October 8th date for long before that. And so looking at that October 8th, you know, the question that first in my mind, okay, look, if there's anything to this, is there any evidence of increased fireballs or meteor activity? So I thought, I'm going to check that out. Well, I showed you what I found. There absolutely was.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And that's what I mean. Is like, this is why I kind of, and we've discussed this before, but this is why I kind of don't like that Sagan thing, because I'm like, who gets to say what's extraordinary? What you showed is that these things may happen quite often, which makes them not necessarily extraordinary. It just depends on the scale of your vision, right?
Yeah.
So is it extraordinary if just because it only happens once every 50 years?
To me, the extraordinary thing, I guess, is that it suggests a process that nobody has really considered, except in very limited. I mean, look, let's face it. Where did this idea first come from? Came from Ignatius Donnelly, right?
Yeah.
To my knowledge, he was the first one to ever make a connection between the Chicago fire, the Peshtigo fire, and the potential cosmic impact, although he thought that it was perhaps debris coming from the disintegration of Comet Biela. Whereas no one mentioned it, as far as I know, until I looked at the obvious, which is, well, is there a meteor stream October 8th? And to discover the Draconids was, well, by gosh, there is. I mean, so it's like when you pose these questions, then you seek the answers to them. So, yeah, there is a meteor. And then you find out that it was in times past a very prominent meteor storm that actually has a lot of fireballs associated with it.
Yeah.
And then you go, wait a second. But how is it that this meteor stream is called the Draconids because of the constellation of Draco, the dragon? And here we are with the ancient lore, and I thought maybe we could dive into some of that as, serpent lore and dragon lore, that kind of stuff. And of course, and that brings us into a whole nother realm, you know, dragons and serpents and things throughout myths. I mean, what is one of the most prevalent entities in the world mythology, if it's not this dragon serpent or some variation of it?
Yeah.
everywhere.
Right.
I mean, yeah, every traditional. I can't think of one that doesn't have some role to play. And then when you begin to look at the correlations amongst the various traditions, and I thought maybe we should look at a little bit at that tonight, and some of the context, the more the not historical, but the mythical context of a little further about these tremendous natural events. And I think that one of the first places we could go is like right to the just to the Bible, because this is the thing, we're all brought up with the Bible in the Western culture. And I mean, if you come back to the biblical stories with this perspective that maybe, what up to this point, if you looked at the biblical stories, they kind of suffer the same fate as mythology in general amongst the scientific community, which is that these are just stories that have no more basis in reality, say, than typical myths from anywhere and everywhere, right? And then if you're a true believer, if you're a Christian and you're particularly the evangelical persuasion or fundamentalist,
like a literalist,
you don't need any scientific explanation for anything that's there. It's all miraculous and supernatural, right? So if you turn to St. Matthew chapter 4, verse 29, and it reads, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light. Well, this is something that can happen literally, both through impact events and volcanic events, right? So anytime there would have been a major volcanic event or an impact event that could have triggered wildfires or resulted in the accretion of cosmic dust to the earth. And here we could get into talking about some of the work of Fred Hoyle and early work of Chandra Wickramasinghe and their ideas about what happens when the earth accretes to its cosmic dust, which can, of course, change the not only the albedo of the Earth's atmosphere, but also the transparency of the Earth's atmosphere. So, you can look at that particular verse and you can say, immediately after the tribulation of those days, shall the sun be darkened and the moon shall not give her light. Well, if you're not trying to see any kind of a scientific context to these verses, well, it doesn't matter. It's just something mythical, basically. If you're a believer, you don't need a scientific explanation because it's God. It's the handiwork of God. It's supernatural. It's miraculous, whatever. However, then you read it at the very next sentence, and I think right there, the author of this is putting the pieces together in such a way that it's just obvious. It's in your face what it actually is the source behind this quote, because then it says, after it says immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven. And the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. So right there, I mean, if we look, okay, and try to see this through the lens of what somebody 2,500 years ago or 3,000 years ago, how they're interpreting natural events, but natural events on a totally different scale, the cosmic scale. I mean, this actually is a perfectly rational sounding statement, actually. Saying, we just use different words. Instead, the after the tribulation, which suggests that there's some kind of a, upset in the balance of nature, right? Which could be attributed to many causes, but associated with these kind of events, because we know from our own studies, impact events, the Younger Dryas had a whole series of secondary consequences and tertiary consequences and feedbacks and so on that literally took a millennia or two to play out. And in fact, I even think we could go so far as to say that some of those aftershocks, of course, have diminished considerably, but are still playing out. Because look, when did sea levels finally stabilize to their more or less their present level? Well, 4,000, 5,000 years ago. Before that, sea levels were still rising. So sea levels are still rising. There's still adjustments going on. In fact, I think we could even speculate so far as to say that some of the seismic activity that we see in the planet today still might be the resonant aftershocks of those changes, because once we begin to comprehend and appreciate how extreme those changes were and how traumatic it would have been to the planet on multiple levels, no, it's nothing overly speculative to think that it could be still suffering the after effects of that transition, that catastrophic transition out of the ice age. Now, when we look at this, instead of saying, well, the sun shall be darkened and the moon shall not give up her light. Well, we just use a different terminology now. We talk about the opacity of the atmosphere. We say, in scientific terms, that the opacity of the atmosphere shall be increased, right? But the most direct consequence of that to an observer on the ground is that the sun is darkened and the moon shall not give up her light. But my point is, maybe we're talking about the same thing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. From the 8th chapter of the book of Revelation, otherwise known as the Apocalypse. And the angel took the censer. What is a censor? Not somebody who wants to prohibit free speech, the other kind of censor.
Incense is
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike would know about that. But Kyle, look up the word censor, C-E-N-S-E-R. Because the angel took the censer.
Yeah, a vessel in which incense is burned, especially during religious services.
Okay. Any more primordial definitions or etymologies?
Another one, burned before an altar, incense burned before an altar, and then a fire pan in which perfumes were burned to sweeten the atmosphere, having its lid perforated and sometimes decorated with figures and designs in open work. What we got?
Uh-huh.
Oh, well, there's a bunch more.
Oh, there is. Anything perhaps suggestive of an astronomical interpretation?
I'll keep looking.
Yeah, it's not that important. But yeah, so a censer is a thing. And usually, Mike, now in the ceremonies, the censer is waved like that.
The priest or deacon or a altar server will take it and swing it, walking around the altar, or sometimes over the gospel book itself, and sometimes waving it in the direction of the parishioners. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And so is there smoke coming out of it?
There is smoke coming out of it.
And what is the shape of the censer?
Interestingly enough, it is cone shaped. It has a bowl with a base to it, but then the top comes up in a cone shape it's perforated and it's hanging from a chain.
Okay.
It's like an upside down cone.
Okay. It's not making anything particular, but I am actually looking at images now. Oh my gosh. Okay, so here I'm seeing several variations on it. I'm even seeing like the Tibetan censer, which the top of it, rather than being cone shaped, is rounded, almost like the bottom. So if it looks very much like a ciborium.
Okay.
Let me look at these. Yeah, I see it is. You're right. It's cone shaped. Very interesting.
I guess they can be different, whatever shapes you want. But the one I've seen at my church is cone shaped. We probably have a spherical shaped one too. But I think cone shaped is fairly common.
Uh-huh. Well, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to see if I can get a picture here and do a quick share screen. And this is the Tibetan censer. Are you seeing this?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that looks very much like a ciborium, but look up here at the top. It's got this kind of a cone-shaped, interesting thing up here,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's got this tracery, this stuff here. Interesting. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and then if you opened it, the bottom would be like a bowl, almost like a chalice, wouldn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And so the incense is in here and it's burning, right? Almost like fallback breccia, burning fallback breccia has just fallen back into the crater and is burning.
If you want to stretch the imagery,
it's a grail with a lid. It looks like a globe with something impacting the top, and then there's smoke all around one hemisphere.
Yeah. Okay, so anyways, back to the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the earth and cast it into the earth. So right there, what kind of picture does that invoke? That's not just an ordinary. I mean, I'd say that's a censer on a scale that's probably several orders of magnitude beyond the one that was being used in the rituals that Mike saw and participated in. And in fact, is that possibly some vision of this kind of a process ultimately at the core of the symbolism here of censer? Okay, so we see censer in the Catholic ritual with incense in it, and then you have a censer in the Tibetan ritual with incense in it. I mean, the censer with incense in it.
Yeah, you have a smoking globe. It's...
So the angel took the censer, filled it with the fire of the altar, and cast it into the earth. And there followed hail and fire, mingled with blood. And they were cast upon the earth. And the third part of the trees were burnt up, and all the green grass was burnt up. Starting to sound a little bit like what might have happened at the Younger Dryas boundary.
Sounds like Tunguska.
Yep.
Sounds like Tunguska. Yes, it does. Now, the third part of the trees, what is the percentage of the global biomass that was burned up at the Younger Dryas boundary?
10%?
I think the estimates are at least 10%.
Yeah.
And maybe
so
more.
Would be 33%. That would be a lot of trees.
That'd be a lot.
Yeah.
Yep.
So 3 times as great as the Younger Dryas event.
Well, as far as we know, because I'm going to be willing to bet money that all of the sites, there are still a lot of sites remaining to be found that will bear the imprint of Younger Dryas firestorms.
Right.
Okay, so then Revelation 18:21, right? Listen to this. And the mighty angel, so these angels, they must have it in for us. And the mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, thus with violence shall the great city Babylon be thrown down and shall be found no more at all.
Wow.
Well, I mean,
sounds familiar.
It sounds like, okay, a bolide impact into an ocean, a big tsunami, boom, some great city wiped out and shall be found no more at all. Now, this is nothing that is so implausible that it needs to be strictly confined to the realm of fantasy, right? It's just all in how we interpret those words, but within the context of things that we know happen. And we know, I think we can safely say with confidence, if these happened and were experienced by people, these events are going to be the kinds of events that imprint themselves indelibly into the human psyche and form the basis of myths and legends and tall tales and folklore and get handed down. Why is this such an unreasonable assumption? In fact, I would take the converse. I would say the unreasonable assumption is to just make the blanket belief that no, such a transmission of human experience is not possible and couldn't happen. And therefore, this legacy of these traditions, these religious beliefs and rituals and ceremonies and myths and all of this stuff has no meaning, beyond the superficial. That beyond that, behind there, at the core of this, at the foundation level, at the basement level of this stuff that we're not really seeing is this whole other order of experience that's left its imprint on human consciousness and has come down to us in terms of these archetypal visions, because every religion has its parallels to what I've just read here. So where does that come from? Is it just born out of some vacuum of human cognition or consciousness, or is there something there that our ancestors experienced and has now essentially fueled these images, these visions, these traditions, these prophecies, whatever? Maybe prophecies are simply the awareness of the grand cycles. Because look, if I've used this analogy before, if everybody's memory, let's say it's the middle of the summer, it's June, and everybody's memory is erased, except for a few people who remember, oh, wait a second, for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere. Well, so everybody is going along June, July, August, and everybody has been enjoying the warmth of summer, but there's these other people whose memories, for whatever reason, have not been erased, and they're saying, well, wait a second, this benign warmth that we're all experiencing here, it's not going to last. The days are going to get shorter, they're going to get darker, and it's going to get colder. And there's going to be a whole different world that appears here. And there's going to be this stuff that comes out of the sky called snow, and it's going to cover everything. And if you're not ready for it, you're going to freeze and you're going to starve.
Burn them.
That guy is the prophet, see? But what is his prophecy? He just knows the side. Anybody who was still around, whose memory was not erased, would be a prophet. You know, and then of course it'll come true. Yeah, wait a second, the days are getting shorter. The temperature is getting cooler.
First they'll set that guy on fire, and then later it'll get colder and they'll realize that he was right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, as it gets colder, they'll set him on fire in order for warmth. That's what it seems like. All right, should we keep going with this trend of thought?
Yeah.
Sure.
How about this? Now think about the stories we've been telling over the last 4 or 5 episodes, and this is right out of the book of the Hopi. So the people went down to live with the ant people. When they were all safe and settled, Teowa commanded Sotuchnang to destroy the world. He rained fire upon it. Fire came from above and below and all around, until the earth, the waters, the air was all one element, fire. And there was nothing left except the people safe inside the womb of the earth. Now, given what we know now, are we going to just assume, oh, this is just some exaggerated myth, or is it really referring to a tradition about the ancestors of the modern Hopi actually surviving some type of enormous cataclysmic ekparusis type event by going underground?
Yeah. But who are the ant people?
Who are the ant people?
Because the ant people are like, we have the place where you can stay down here. You know, it's like, I'll tell you, Russ, that's the question that's plagued me ever since I first read that account on a cold winter's night in northern Minnesota in about the year 1972. Well, good, because it's plagued me since I learned about it as well. Who the hell are these ant people?
The ant people. Yeah.
But I agree with you. It does sound like it, you know, if you're looking at it through the lens of all the stuff we've discussed on this show and the stuff Kyle and I talk about on our podcast, it's like, it sounds like so many of these myths are telling us it's not a supernatural thing. These are our ancestors talking about things that maybe their ancestors experienced. You know, it's like and it does sound like there can be science behind it, that they're usually talking, you know, it's phrased in interesting
well, they're
language.
putting it in terms they can understand.
Yeah. Right.
In terms of their culture can understand.
Mm-hmm.
Well, also that it's been possibly translated over and over again by people who forgot what the real meaning was.
Told and retold as oral stories,
They put it in terms that they could perhaps understand.
Yeah. It's possible that the people who originally witnessed it really did maybe have a better understanding of what was happening, but that civilization's been lost.
Like the ant people, they knew it was up.
Yeah.
Literally. Yeah, it's almost as if the ant people had prepared this place of refuge.
Right.
Yeah.
And But yeah, who were the ant people?
And where might that place of refuge be?
Well, isn't it they're supposed to have emerged somewhere in the Grand Canyon? Isn't that right, Randall? The continuation of that Hopi story is that they exited.
Yeah, and then they migrated to the four directions.
Yes.
And yeah, and I have not made a deep dive into Native American lore, but my God, I know there's a rich treasure trove of stuff there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, they've got details on the great floods that, we need to be looking at. And I think we're kind of getting to a point now where they're certainly with Bertram and Cleve, Justito and Bertram, I always have a hard time with his last name. Cleve is Zuni and Bertram is Hopi. And, they're opening up about their stories in ways that they were very reluctant to do a few decades ago and back. So, maybe that'll be a trend. And I think it would be a very valuable trend. And I think what it would do is if it would actually enhance the importance and the value of their traditions to the academic and scientific world at the large. If it finally dawns on them to go, wait a second, this is authentic sources of information here.
Yeah.
With specific details that can maybe fill in some of the gaps that are missing in our understanding of these phenomena. But you see, one of the things that we're kind of now straitjacketing this kind of a discussion is that, and we're going to run into this, and anyone who up to this point is pursuing catastrophic models of Earth history, is that these run counter to the dogmas and the agendas of some very powerful factions right now that have a lot of resources, a lot of money, a lot of true believers behind them, that wants to divert the discussion away from natural global change to focus exclusively on anthropogenic global change being caused by an enhancement of carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere. And it has billions of dollars behind it. And so what that is now attempting to do, but not succeeding, is monopolize the conversation about global change. Because if we accept the fact that both from the scientific realm, empirical data, theoretical data about the past history of this planet, and then we look at this incredible global legacy of stories and traditions that have come down to us and realize that these two ways of perceiving the world are perfectly complementary. And suddenly we realize that, yes, we live on this extraordinarily dynamic planet that has undergone all kinds of upheavals on every front, that civilizations have arisen and collapsed over and over again, right? But we don't want to really be paying attention to that. You see, it necessarily gets political. For anybody who's expounding a catastrophist model of Earth history is going to run up against that wall.
Right. You can't really avoid it.
But the wall has a lot of cracks in it. Big cracks, major cracks. So I'm kind of thinking that wall might be like our modern version of the Berlin Wall. And it could come crashing down any day. When we realize, hey, you know what? We've created this amazing civilization that is now encompassing the planet within one of the intervals, the natural intervals of relative quiet, with relative low-level events. But what we've seen from the natural record, from the record of natural history of the planet, is that these episodes are regularly and repeatedly punctuated by catastrophic global events. And see, that puts the whole a different perspective on things than, and right now, everything is internalized. The enemy is the Russians or the Chinese or whoever, not the fact that we're all, regardless of our political affiliation, religious beliefs, ethnicity, gender, race, any of that, none of that matters, because within the big picture of global change, we're all going to be. That's the great equalizer, if you want to put it that way. And it will erase the significance of all of these other variations that are being used to advance various agendas that are keeping us apart because of superficial things. You see, that's the point, I think, is that understanding this model of global change that is actually indisputably now being presented through the scientific model and completely reinforced and supported and confirmed through the traditional archaic model is that, yeah, we can sit there and do whatever we want, but nature's going to kick our fuck ass. Sooner or later, it's going to happen. And all of the things that we put in place up to this point aren't going to amount to anything, you see. And that one of these natural events, these catastrophic natural events, can affect more environmental change by orders of magnitude than anything we've done. Do you think that there's anything that the human species have done, whether it's through our history of agriculture, through industrialization, do you think that would anywhere even approach the geomorphic remodeling of this planet that occurred during the transition out of the Ice Age? Is there anything that we've done that would be the equivalent of a 400-foot rise in sea level? Is there anything that we've done that would be the equivalent of drowning several million square miles of continental land? Is there anything that we've done that would be the equivalent of, say, 7 million square miles or more, 8 million, maybe 9 million when you include Eurasia, of landmass getting swallowed up in ice sheets 1,000 feet thick up to 2 miles thick? I mean, imagine that we were to go in and clear cut the entire northern half of North America. We were to say, okay, the Canadian government and the government of the northern United States, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, all of these decide, you know what, let's cash in on all our timber, and we'll let the timber companies come in and clear cut the entire northern half of the North American continent, from the 48th parallel up to the Arctic, up to the tundra, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and they can cut every single tree.
And kill every single blade of grass and other piece of life on it.
And all the animals. Yeah.
Yes, and all the animals, that entire ecosystem, we're going to wipe it out. Well, that's what nature did. Nature did that. You know, it went from the interglacial to the glacial. And in what had been essentially steppe savanna, which had been grassland, which had been a mosaic of forests, grasslands, 7 million square miles roughly got eradicated and buried under thousands of feet of ice and frozen for 20,000 years. Now, what would we do that would be the equivalent to that? At the same time that's happening, sea levels dropping 400 feet. Now, just think for a minute what that's doing to the shallow marine ecologies of the planet. It's completely wiping them out. It's wiping out millions of square miles of shallow marine ecologies around the entire planet.
Right. All the coral reefs, everything.
Yes. So
that's right.
Here's my point. What have we done yet that would even come close to that in terms of its imprint on the planet? See, that's my point. We have another event like that. This entire thing that we've done here, this entire drama of building modern civilization, it's gone. It's done. 10,000 years from now, the archaeologists will be arguing, well, you know, there was nothing going on back then, because where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? Well, when you start thinking about mega floods, mega fires like we've been talking about, we haven't talked about some of the volcanic eruptions that occurred during the transition out of the Ice Age, or some of the seismic events that may have approached 10 and 11 in the Richter scale. We haven't even talked about that. You know, because of the deglaciation, you had major tectonic movements. Well, see, we could get, and that's the idea of what we're trying to do with this podcast, is bring in this alternate model and say, look, you know, this old gradualist model, you know, all of our modern conceptions of environmentalism are born out of the gradualist model, right? Because think about it, within the gradualist model, right, you might have a local perturbation here or there, a regional catastrophe, sure. But what's been conspicuously excluded from the gradualist model is global catastrophic events that could easily wipe out a civilization. So those are excluded. But a realistic working model of this planet we inhabit has to include the fact that there have been repeated countless catastrophes, some that on the upper scale, are wiping out 3/4 of all species on the planet. Others, which may not even cause barely a species extinction level event, but would still be fully capable of destroying civilization. See, so it's a matter of thresholds. It's a matter of scales. It's a matter of perspectives here that we're talking about. So
another thing, I mean, all of that is absolutely true. And another thing I think that would happen, if that became more understood, that there's many catastrophic events and that they can happen much more frequently. Like the most recent one wasn't just like the dinosaur killer. Like, in other words, that they've happened much more recently than that, and they've caused mass extinctions, and they affect the globe, and they can happen in an instant, a geological instant. Is the possibility that we aren't the pinnacle of human civilization? We're just the most recent version of it in, the most recent calm period.
Yes, that's really, I see. And here's the thing. This is not some pseudoscientific idea.
Right.
It's an idea that should be entertained seriously. And yes, there's going to be all of these academic trained archaeologists and prehistorians and people who are experts, absolutely, in their own particular area. They're authorities in their particular area of expertise. But even some of the critics, we saw why Randall is wrong. That to me epitomized this whole perspective that doesn't understand these things we're talking about right here.
Yeah.
That hasn't really factored in this possibility that there are these events that exogenic in many cases, endogenic in others, sometimes working together, because I think it's very possible and plausible that impact events might be associated with periods of intense volcanism. I mean, we've seen, certainly we see that at the Cretaceous Tertiary boundary, the KT boundary. We know that there were tremendous volcanic events. Some of the great volcanic events in world history were happening right there, straddling the KT boundary. The Deccan Traps of India, the 245 million year old Permian Triassic. You have the Siberian Traps, another one of the great volcanic episodes in Earth history, and gigantic mega floods of fluidized basalt flowing over and drowning thousands and thousands of square miles. The formation of the Columbia Basalt Plateau itself, right? We could go on. So, David Alt speculated that maybe there was a major impact 17 million years ago. Well, we could be talking about episodes of volcanism, episodes of seismicity, geomagnetic field reversals and fluctuations. This is controversial, but it's certainly a possibility. The climate change, obviously, mass extinctions. As it turns out, there's a whole lot of phenomena that maybe up to now or within the last generation, the thought has been it's a purely terrestrial phenomena. But a lot of these things may have a celestial component, even a celestial trigger, you see. So, I thought we'd look at perhaps some, and it's particularly relevant right now, but actually segue over to some of the actual evidence of great impacts that we've touched upon. A lot of these things we've touched upon, but haven't taken a deep dive into just to unbox the details.
Well, should we take a break before you get into another deep subject? I mean,
I think that's probably a good idea.
Okay, a little early break, but that'll give you more time on the back end.
Okay, I can live with it. All right,
we'll be right back, folks.
Right.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Kosmographia podcast. We're still going to continue on this I guess, this train of thought and the serpent and dragon symbols throughout the ancient world. But before that, we want to mention CBDfromthegods.com, where you get all your CBD products. Helps the podcast, and you can put in RC ships free to get free shipping. We appreciate everybody who shops there, and they're a good company and have built a relationship with them over this time. So thanks for supporting them and us.
And Russ, I won't be needing to borrow any of your oil in Montana next week because I'll have my own.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So make sure you bring
I'm
some
not
too.
sure I
so you
believe
don't
that.
have
I
to
was going
be.
to borrow yours.
That's
you
what
gotta
I'm
pay
saying.
Me, you need to pay me back.
It's payback time.
That's right.
And I talked to Mike Robertson, our good friend and CEO of howtube.com, and they're going to supply us with product to give away. We'll have another trivia contest.
All right.
And we'll be giving away free products, salve, gummies, and oil. And so, yeah, we can look forward to that.
All right. That's always fun.
It is always fun, isn't it? And so far, we're getting good feedback from the people that are trying out the product.
Well,
so.
this show might not be published until after we get back, so it's probably already happened for the people who are watching it.
That's true.
There's weird time travel happening right now. So
Yeah.
we've already been to Montana and we're back. And
It was great.
You did the giveaway and it was awesome.
It was so
Yeah,
cool.
we're stuck in a time warp here.
We went down this road back here in the big draw.
That's right.
Oh, man. Big draw. Yeah, God, I wish we could just bring all the listeners and fans out there. I wish we could just bring you guys with us. Someday we'll have,
Well, we'll try.
In spirit. you
Yeah,
know,
in
we
spirit.
Mega
And
bus.
Take pictures, take video, and
yeah.
Try
I'm
to
gonna
share it
Try
all.
to live stream some more.
yeah.
To the Cosmographia channel from some of this. I think that'd be fun.
yeah, I'm
that'd be
thinking we
great.
should
Yeah.
just get at least, 10 or 20,000 fans. We'll dress up in robes and sandals and we'll trudge through Big Draw.
Oh yeah, that would be great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that would
We
be
can
awesome.
be swinging a censer.
There we go.
Randall can be swinging the censer in front of the.
Oh,
Mike's not laughing,
amused.
so it must not be
We'll be
funny.
waiting
Blasphemous.
for the second coming from the heavens.
Oh my
Well,
God.
I'll say Mike's got on the nice blue shirt there. Russ has got on the hat. So yeah, get your Cosmographia gear.
Yep.
RandallCarlson.com/shop.
Yeah.
SHOP.
There you go.
Yeah, all kinds of
Check
cool
out-
and fun stuff.
Yeah,
there.
people, every tour we do, you get a commemorative T-shirt.
That's
So
right.
this was from our Scablands tour. Which
Yep.
one am I wearing?
Last
Well, this is
fall,
the
yeah.
map.
Yeah, you're wearing the most recent one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the T-shirt for this upcoming Montana trip is great. Laura's done a
Exclusive.
super good job
Yeah.
with the profile of Chief Cliff. Now, you guys haven't seen Chief Cliff yet, have you?
Not yet.
No,
we
sir.
will be seeing it in a week.
we're
Well,
going
we
to have.
have already by the time this
Yes,
show is
actually,
published.
we've
yes.
seen it. That's
Yeah,
right.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome.
It's not just photos.
Okay. Well, yeah. So we're going to be seeing some. We saw some interesting stuff last week when we were out in Montana exploring the basin of Lake Missoula. Okay, well, I'm sure we're going to hopefully bring some fresh finds back. There's a few things that I'm going to want to look at out there to try to, in other words, fill in some of the gaps here and there on the alternative model, if we want to call it that, the alternate model. So, all right, so get on back to
Serpents.
serpents.
Yeah.
Now, you
Dragons.
guys, there's something, let's see, what is it? There's some kind of affinity or affiliation you guys have, isn't there? With
There is.
An Ophidian affiliation.
That's
yes.
right.
an Ophidian affiliation. Yes, that's what it is. All right.
Yeah, we've all been fascinated by the serpent symbols throughout
Mhm.
the ages
Oh, yeah.
and the prominence,
Yeah, the
in all the
prominence,
myths of the
yeah.
serpent.
So
the
it-
Ouroboros, the cycles of time, and
I
I don't
know.
know. That's just yeah.
Yeah. So we'll have to dive into that Ouroboros symbol at some point coming up soon. Yeah, look at there. I can't see. Stand up so I
Yeah,
can
Kyle's got the hieroglyphic version of our logo.
Look at that.
We had that made in Egypt. Yeah, Brothers of the Serpent right there with the serpent, and then I have the standard
Nice.
version.
Hadn't seen that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah. You want to tell us a little more about that?
What's that?
The Brothers of the Serpent, is that a historical kind of deep group, some sort?
Yeah, I mean
knowledge?
it is, legendary, but it's, does it exist? Probably, maybe. Graham hints at it, a monastic order of people who occasionally inject information into humanity to restart civilization after
During the wasteland, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the serpent in the Bible is an interesting character.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I kind of don't think that the identity of that serpent, I think, has kind of been overlooked. I think there's more to that symbol than meets the eye there.
Sure. Yeah. And it's associated with, with knowledge. Of course, in the Egyptian tradition is, it's on the caduceus, the serpent.
Yep. So
there's many symbols
and then
about it.
I was just thinking in the beginning of the show about the phrase in Genesis where it says, man will crush his head, the serpent's head, and the serpent will strike his heel.
mm-hmm.
When I, thinking about the impacts idea, it's like, were we actually shooting them down and crushing their heads?
Oh,
They were striking our heel? I don't know.
Yeah, there's some interesting possibilities there that are, I think, worthy of exploration. You remember how Genesis, the King James, describes the serpent as being more subtle than any beast of the field. What does that mean? More subtle. And what did the serpent say to the woman? Remember? Think about it. What did the serpent say to the woman?
I mean,
serpent. What?
Says quite a few things, right?
Well, yeah. What was the first thing he said?
Oh.
He said, hath God said ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the woman said unto the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the tree of this garden, the trees of the garden. But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, ye shall not eat of it, lest neither shall ye even touch it. Not only shall you not eat of it, you shall not even touch it, lest ye die.
Hmm.
Yeah, and the serpent, what did the serpent say then? The serpent said unto the woman, ye shall not surely die. And then he gives a little context to this order that she shall not eat of the tree, the fruit of the tree, or even touch it. Right? And what does the serpent say then at that point? For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, what's going to happen? Your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as the gods.
Yeah, that was the problem.
That was a problem. I find that extremely interesting to ponder.
It's like Promethean in a way, right? This
Very
is
much so, yes.
Yeah.
Then what happened? What happened after that? When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise.
Yeah.
She took of the fruit thereof and did eat. And after she ate, what did she then do? She gave also unto her husband, and he did eat. Like, hey, Adam, you got to try this.
Yeah.
But then what happened? So they both ate of the fruit. Did they die?
No.
No. 7th verse. What does it say? The eyes of them both were opened. So what did the serpent say? The serpent said, in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened.
Yeah.
What did God say? No. Well, now bear in mind, this isn't God. This is the Lord. This is Jehovah in the Hebrew text. It's not Elohim. It's Jehovah.
Yeah, because it seems like in the traditional view of that story, that the serpent is the bad guy and the Lord is the good guy. But the first thing that happens is the Lord is lying and the serpent tells the truth.
Well, I mean, if we're going to take this at face value,
yeah,
the Lord says, "You shall not eat thereof. You shall, or even touch it, lest ye surely die."
Right, which is a lie because they didn't die.
The serpent says, "Yeah, you shall not surely die. Your eyes will be opened." And what does the 7th verse say? It says the eyes of them both were opened.
Yeah.
So this is interesting to me because, see, it's in this simple-minded version of Christianity, all of these things like the serpent, the devil, Satan, the beast, Lucifer, all of these things are conflated.
Right.
Right? But is the serpent really the same as Satan? Is the serpent the same as Lucifer? And who is Lucifer? Who is Satan? See, the problem is to me, is that these are symbols for things, for concepts, for principles, for properties, for events, maybe. I don't think, and see, the problem is we're given a false choice. Either you just accept this whole thing, again, supernaturally, in which case it has to have no consistency with reason or logic or knowledge in particular. On the other hand, if you take the scientific worldview, then this is basically just superstition and has no valid meaning relative to reality as we know it. But then I would say, the initiate, what makes and distinguishes an initiate from the population at large is that the initiate looks at something like this and realizes that these are symbols and these symbols are conveying a deeper meaning. And then, I mean, what does the 8th verse say? After this, after they've eaten and their eyes have been opened, then what happens? Well, they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. Now that's interesting. Walking in the garden. Yeah. So anyways, there's more to this. And I think it's actually worth going into deeper. And really, you have to go in, I think, to the original language. You have to go back into the original classical Hebrew that it was written in. And then I think that perhaps we can peel some of the literary veneer back and see the underlying meaning that's being conveyed by this imagery. So, this image of the Lord God walking the garden, rather interesting. And is that the supreme creator of the entire universe is taking a walk in the garden there? Who is this Lord God? And then you have to remember that Lord, the word translated as Lord, is Yahweh. Yud, He, Vav, Zayin, right? 4 letters, the tetragrammaton. Mm-hmm. God, the God that's translated as God is Elohim.
Elohim, yeah.
Elohim, yes. And what most people do not know is that the word Elohim in Hebrew, it's a plural.
It's plural, yeah.
Yod Mem. Putting Yod Mem at the end of a Hebrew word is like putting S. If you have chair, you have one chair. You have chairs with an S. That S renders it plural. Aleph, Lamed, He, Yod Mem, Elohim. It ends in a plural. So it really, I mean, you could make the argument that it should be translated as a plural, in which case it would be the gods, plural. But it's usually taken as God, singular. But if, for the sake of just, speculation, purely, forming hypothetical scenarios, if you say the Lord God, you're actually saying the God Jehovah. Now, if you look at it that way, suddenly you've got a whole different perspective on the biblical story. But that was not necessarily going to be the subject matter of what we talked about tonight. But in some ways it connects, because we are talking about serpents and dragons. And of course, one of the most prominent serpents in the Western tradition is the biblical serpent. And I think what we tried to show just by repeating these verses right out of King James is that perhaps there might be some other layer of meaning, some other interpretation as to the identity of the serpent, because clearly the serpent, if you want to take it at face value, I mean, if you were to hear this story and you'd never been exposed to dogmatic Christian traditions or anything at all about Christians, and you just said, here's this character who says this, and here's this character who says this, who would you think was telling the truth and who would you think was lying? Just from the narrative itself, you would think, well, the serpent is the one telling the truth, and Jehovah is telling him a fib. He doesn't want him to eat of this tree and eat of the fruit of knowledge. Why not? And who is this Jehovah? See, I don't know. Is Jehovah's a completely supernatural being that has no real existence outside of, the fevered imagination of our ancestors, in the Middle East 3,000 years ago? Or is there some other layer of meaning to this story that maybe we could tease out, especially if we were able to look at it in the context of similar stories, creation stories from all over the rest of the world? So let's go on. Revelation 12. Yeah, what?
Oh, I was just, do you mind if I add something to the
Absolutely
idea?
not.
It's just interesting as well that later, and you're probably going to get there if you continue the reading, but that essentially what ended up happening to these people is that they were cast out of a garden and they were in a wasteland.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get to the garden because of a flaming sword.
Yeah.
So it's like, well.
Or much? Metaphor much?
Metaphor much?
Yeah.
So yeah, in terms of what happened next, so they heard the Lord God walking in the cool of the garden, and they got afraid and they hid themselves, right? Remember, and they hid themselves, and I remember one of the things that it describes that when they ate of the fruit of the tree, that's when they realized they were naked.
Yeah, I find that interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, they suddenly were like, they were ashamed. They covered themselves, and then they hid from Lord God.
Yeah. So the Lord God called unto Adam and said unto him, where art thou? And Adam said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked. I hid myself. And he said, Lord God, who told thee that thou wast naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I commanded thee that thou shouldest not eat? So what did the man say? What did the man do?
Oh, yeah. Eve told me to do it.
He blamed it.
He cast
The woman whom thou gavest to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. Yes. Divert the blame onto the woman. And then the Lord God said unto the woman, what is this that thou hast done? And the woman said, the serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. But remember what her motive was? Let's go back and look. The motive was the woman saw that the tree was good for food. It was pleasant to the eyes, and most importantly, a tree to be desired to make one wise. So she committed the crime of seeking wisdom. It sounds to me like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing seems to be by the Jehovah, an injunction against letting humanity have wisdom to see.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
And so then what happened? What was her punishment for the crime of seeking wisdom? Well, first, the Lord God, Yahweh Elohim, said unto the serpent, by the way, the serpent is Nachash. nun chet sheen in the Hebrew, which once we kind of peel that back and take a deeper look into that, I think we'll see some interesting connections. And I think we should probably circle back to that in a upcoming, maybe even the next episode of this that we do. Because since we've opened up this can of worms on discussing the serpent, the great dragon, I think there's some important clues here. But in order to extract that information from this narrative, we're going to have to go into some sideline areas like Kabbalah and look at some of the numbers that are behind these words and names and phrases.
Oh, man.
And so
that sounds great.
Yahweh Elohim said unto the serpent, because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field, and upon thy belly thou shalt go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. And I will, and here's the verse you were referring to, and I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed, and it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Now, if we realize that the serpent is on one level now, and I'm not, one of the things I want to do here is when you get into these things that we will call, euphemistically, the occult, in quotation marks, the occult, basically just meaning things that are unknown to, mainstream thought, that's stuff that tends to be hidden and outside the regular discourse of reality, if you want to put it that way. So when you look at this and realize that there are layers of meaning, and the objective almost is the contrast of science, where what you're trying to do in modern science is you're trying to narrow as much as possible, restrict a specific meaning, and give a term, a scientific term. What constitutes a scientific term is not its protean nature, that it can be interpreted in multiple different ways, but its specificity. How narrow of a meaning can you give to a specific term? And so there's a whole lexicon that emerges to cover every variant of meaning that might apply to some body of empirical or theoretical knowledge. We certainly see it in geology, that everything has its very precise terminology. Whereas occultism is like the opposite of that. A symbol is considered a vehicle for conveyance, and there can be layered meanings conveyed in that symbol. And in fact, the more meanings there are implicit within a symbol, the more powerful it is. And so because we interpret the serpent according to one particular strata of meaning, doesn't exclude the possibility of there being other layers of meaning. So when we come back to the idea of the serpent and the woman, what is oftentimes associated with a woman? Let's think about that. Because since we're thinking in terms of the cosmic context, what is often a goddess, a woman associated with what?
Nature.
Nature, yes.
Earth.
Earth, yes. Yes, absolutely. Earth. Planet Earth. Yes. And if we think about this reference to the woman as being a stand-in, at least on one level, for Earth, we might begin to see the glimmerings of a possible interpretation, alternate interpretation here. And the Lord God said unto the woman, what is this that thou hast done? And the woman said, the serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. He now goes through all this, cursing the serpent, then putting enmity between thee and the woman. Okay? Think about if the woman can actually be interpreted on one level as a symbol for the earth. And all throughout mythology, we find the earth being represented in almost all cases as a female.
As a mother, yeah.
As a mother, right. The serpent shall bruise her head, and the woman shall bruise his heel. And then
I thought it was the other way around.
Yeah, the woman bruises his head.
it shall bruise thy head. I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel.
Strange.
Yeah. Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow shalt thou bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. And unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not even eat of it, cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Now, this is introducing a plot twist here into the narrative that plays out throughout the whole biblical story, this idea of the curse. Remember, we'll get back into that. I mean, the curse next makes its appearance in the slaying of Abel by Cain, right? So think about this. You know, this is a pretty harsh punishment for the crime of seeking wisdom, I would think. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field, and in the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground. For out of it wast thou taken. For dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return. And Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living. So then what happened? Like you said, Kyle, the Lord sent them forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence they were taken. But before they did that, there's something very interesting. Remember, I said that the word Elohim, as you knew, was a plural, right? And generally, if you're not familiar with the Hebrew grammar, you're not going to know this or even begin to even think about what the implications of that are. But nonetheless, the translators slipped in hints here and there. I'm convinced of it. I'm convinced that these were deliberate hints. Verse 22, chapter 3. And the Lord God said, or in other words, and Yahweh Elohim, or in our alternate translation, and the God Jehovah. I will just preface this verse with that translation. Okay, the King James says, "And the Lord God said." In our alternate translation, I will say it this way: "And the God Jehovah said." Now listen carefully to what follows. Now this is the King James English. Behold, the man is become as one of us. Right there.
Yeah, who's that us?
Behold, the man is become as one of us. And now, lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore, the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the garden cherubims or cherubims. Now that is an interesting word to dive into. East of the Garden of Eden, cherubims, and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. Interesting stuff, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Anyhow, anyways, we'll go on to, I'm going to jump forward from Genesis, the first book of the Bible to Revelation, the last book of the Bible. Revelation 12, verses 7 through 9. And there was war in heaven, and Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. And the dragon fought, and his angels. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Now, the Revised Standard Version of the Bible uses the term the ancient serpent, who was called the devil. In the King James, it says that old serpent called the devil. In the Revised Standard, it's been slightly, the translation is slightly altered. The word old has been replaced with the word ancient. So it reads that ancient serpent who is called the devil. Back in 1982, Victor Klube and Bill Napier, who you guys are well aware of who they are, the British astronomer, astrophysicists who've been doing the work on catastrophism and comets, particularly comets. And you know that Bill Napier, he has contributed papers linking the Younger Dryas impact event with the Taurid meteor stream. Very important paper written by Napier. Bill Napier actually also gave some very favorable comments to Graham when myself and Graham Hancock were on Joe Rogan, and we were discussing the Younger Dryas boundary and events. And I mentioned the work of Klube and Napier and Asher and some of the others that I kind of called the neo-catastrophists, and I extended the pedigree of their work back to who was the comet guy again? Come to me in a second. Back in the 40s, did the first photographic studies of the Taurid meteor shower. Fred Whipple. Anyways, 1982, Victor Klube and Bill Napier, the title of the book, The Cosmic Serpent, a catastrophist view of Earth history. The earliest recorded myths are those of combat between a god or hero and a dragon. The dragon was a familiar figure in Greece, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Babylon, India, China, North America, and elsewhere. He is a gigantic monster. He spouts fire and smoke, bellows and hisses. He throws rocks and is the creator of terrible destruction, and his home is in the sky. Now, if we go back and try to recall, some of the eyewitness accounts from the Tunguska event of 1908, you could almost take some of those eyewitness accounts and plug these verses 2 through 4 from the second chapter of Acts right into those eyewitness descriptions of what happened with the Tunguska event and its aftermath in 1908. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a mighty rushing wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. I can't help but thinking of some of the stories from the Peshtigo and Hinckley fires. And now, when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together and were confounded. Remember what happened in the aftermath of Tunguska when in the nearby village, the people ran out into the street? I showed the slide of the great Leonid meteor shower. Everybody running out into the street, hiding. They were bending over, covering their heads because they thought that the meteors were going to be striking them in the head, thinking again that the world was ending. So we've seen over and over again in these narratives that people experiencing these cosmic events think it's apocalyptic, think it's Armageddon, think it's the end of the world. We saw that repeatedly just in the stories of the great mega fires, the Ep085 fires that we've been exploring in the last, 5 episodes. From the First Kings, chapter 19, verses 11 through 12. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind rent the mountains, and brake in pieces the rocks before the Lord. And after the wind, an earthquake, and after the earthquake, a fire. I don't know, sounds like it could be talking about an impact event to me. Or is that just me?
Nope. I'm with you on that.
Not just you, yeah.
Acts 2, verses 17 through 20. And it shall come to pass in the last days, saith God, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and I will shew wonders in heaven above, and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood. And of course, when you have a lot of particulate matter in the atmosphere, yes, the moon can look red, very red. Revelation chapter 6, verses 12 through 14. And I beheld when he had opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. Could they possibly be talking about meteorite impacts here? You think? There was a great earthquake. An impact certainly is going to cause an earthquake. In fact, even Tunguska that didn't hit the earth itself caused an earthquake, like 5.5, something in that neighborhood on the Richter scale, right? The sun becomes black as sackcloth of hair and the moon is blood. Well, now you've got a highly polluted atmosphere, which is going to cause that. So is it possible that this could be referring to a meteor storm, a series of impacts, an impact, a single impact, multiple impacts? I beheld when he opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. Next verse, and the stars of heaven fell unto earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. Sounds to me like it's talking about a multi-impact event. Or is that just me?
Not just you.
It's not just me? Okay.
And it's not.
I'm relieved to know that
There's at least
it's
two
not
of
just
us.
me. Psalm 76. I mean, you realize, my God, this Bible is full of catastrophism.
Yes.
Psalm 76, verses 16 through 18. The waters saw thee, O God. The waters saw thee. They were afraid. The depths also were troubled. Well, sounds to me like they could be talking about perhaps an oceanic impact. The clouds poured out water. Well, we know that that's going to be a consequence of an oceanic impact, don't we? We know that an oceanic impact has to convert a huge amount of that thermal energy. As it enters the ocean, it's going to convert water into vapor, and that vapor has to rain out. The clouds poured out water. The skies sent out a sound. Thine arrows also went abroad. Arrows. I think arrows might actually turn out to be one of the more regular symbols or images invoked. And we can actually make, I think, a strong case for arrows, swords. The voice of thy thunder was in the heaven. The lightnings lightened the world. The earth trembled and shook. 2 Peter, 3rd chapter, verses 10 through 13. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night. Now, let's think about some of the imagery from the Ep085, these great firestorms that we've been learning about over the last few months. The day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night. In other words, we don't know. One of the first things that we see over and over again repeated about Chelyabinsk event came like a thief in the night. Nobody knew it was coming. Nobody predicted it. No scientist saw it. No astronomer said, hey, there's going to be this bolide exploding over Chelyabinsk, Siberia tomorrow or next week. No, it came like a thief in the night. The day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burnt up. Nevertheless, we, and this is the secret of the Grail right here, nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth, wherein dwelleth righteousness. And then I have a little bit of a commentary about the devil in the original Greek in the New Testament, the devil. In the Greek, the devil, the word for devil, do you know what it is by any chance in the Greek? Diabolos.
Yeah,
Diablo. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, diabolos. Now, if we go to Strong's Concordance for the meaning of that, we find the word traducer, which essentially means a false accuser. Diabolos comes from diabolo, from which it derives the means to traduce or to accuse. But let's not stop there. Let's keep pushing back into the etymological origins. We see that diabolo is made up of two more primitive words, dia, D-I-A, which is a primary preposition meaning through, and ballo. Ballo is a verb which has a collection of meanings according to the use and the context. But among these meanings, here's what we find. It means to throw more or less violently. It also means to cast down. It also means synonyms here from the Greek: to cast out, to pour, to strike, to throw down, to send down. A variant of the word diabolo is diabano or diobiano, which is a word that means to cross over. Dia, a variant of the word dis, which is connected with the word Zeus. And in fact, in some variations, the two are almost interchangeable. The word dis, interestingly, turns out to be an obsolete form of the name of the supreme deity of the Greeks, which we render in its modern form as Zeus. Zeus, the same deity known to the Latin as Jove or Jupiter. Jove, Jehovah. Integrating some of these meanings renders an altogether different picture of the devil than the conventional view, right? So let's go back from the verse from Revelations. That old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. Which deceiveth the whole world. Okay, this is the traducer, the accuser, and the idea that Satan deceiveth the whole world. The word deceiveth in the Greek is planon or planon. It's pi, lambda, alpha, nu, eta, nu, eta. Excuse me, nu, omicron, nu. I forget the exact spelling in the Greek, but it's planon or planon, and it comes from the word pi, lambda, alpha, nu, omicron, final sigma, I believe is what it is. Planos. Anyways, when you render it into English, it's planos or planos. So this is the original meaning of the word deceiveth, right? So looking up that word, planos, from Strong's Concordance regarding the Greek original, it's of uncertain affinity, but it means roving, say as a tramp, and by implication, an imposter or a misleader, deceiver, seducing. Among related words, we find plané, which means to stray or straying, such as straying from orthodoxy. We also find the word planeo, which means to roam, or to cause to roam, or to go astray, as from virtue or truth, to wander, to be out of the way. Now let's pause for a minute there and think back to a myth where someone, an offspring of the gods, one of the gods, went astray, right? Who was that? Who went astray and set the world on fire?
That'd be Phaeton.
Phaeton, yeah.
Phaeton, yes. Planeo, to roam. Okay, so this word deceiveth actually goes back and has these root meanings of to stray, which can mean straying from orthodoxy, but it also means to roam or to cause to roam, to go astray. Now, it can be to go astray from virtue or truth, certainly. It can also mean to wander. So what was the nature, if we go back?
It's like planet. The
word planos, planos, however, gave rise to another closely related word whose meaning may more nearly suggest the original intent of the author of Revelation. Planetes, which comes from that. A rover. Planet is erratic and wandering.
Wandering stars.
Yeah,
Exactly. Planets.
Wandering stars. So when you probe into these things, you can kind of peel back these layers and realize that there might be whole other meanings concealed therein. And then, of course, what is Zeus known for? Hurling thunderbolts.
The thunderbolts, yes.
Yeah.
And also having sex with everything in sight. That's the other thing he's known for.
Well, that brings us back to exobiology and the Holy Grail.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Here's from the History of Japan, translated by J.G. London, back in 1728, referring to events in the reign of Sinin, which began in 29 BC. In the 36th year of his reign, it rained stars from heaven. In Japan, in the 40th year of his reign, on a clear and serene day, there arose of a sudden in China a violent storm of thunder and lightning. Comets, fiery dragons, and uncommon meteors appeared in the airs, and it rained fire from heaven. Sounds a bit similar, doesn't it? From the book, The Romance of Comets by Mary Proctor, written in 1926. I love to go back to some of this older stuff where some of these people are speculating without being hamstrung by being overly dogmatic, comets have sometimes been pictured as dragons. And according to Pliny, the shape of a comet indicated its character as a portent. Thus, some were shown as arrowheads. I called attention to several references to arrows, to arrowheads, sea monsters, swords, lances, and flames. In AD 69, according to Josephus, several signs appeared in the sky announcing the destruction of Jerusalem. And here is the quote from Pliny, from Josephus. Amongst other warnings, a comet, one of the kind called Ziphius, because their tails appear to represent the blade of a sword, was seen above the city for a space of a whole year. Lance, right? Arrows, the blade of a sword. Here's from a European chronicle set down around 1000 AD, quoted in Proctor, the same book, and quoted by Carl Sagan in his book on comets. The heavens having opened, a kind of, and here we have now the introduction of yet another symbol of this kind of phenomena. The heavens having opened, a kind of burning torch fell upon the earth, leaving behind it a long train of light, similar to a flash of lightning. Such was its light that it frightened not only those who were in the open country, but those who were within doors. As this opening in the heavens slowly closed, men saw with horror the figure of a dragon, whose feet were blue and whose head seemed continually to increase. So, like you said, I think, Kyle, or one of you guys said, people are going to interpret and they're going to see things within the context of their understanding. If people believe that dragons were real or that there was some creature in nature, obviously, when you look at, say, the smoke from some of the meteors that have fallen to Earth, look at the Chelyabinsk. You could look at that and you could see that somebody could interpret that as a fiery serpent or a fiery dragon.
And they also use the terminology there in some of those accounts from Tunguska about the heavens opening. First there's a line, and then there's like the heavens open, and then the fire comes out of the sky. Yeah,
exactly. Also from Mary Proctor, she says comets are called broom stars in China, a name derived from the form of their tails, which have the very prosaic name of brooms. We can add brooms to our list of symbols that have been employed throughout the ages to represent celestial events, comets, meteors, meteor storms, that sort of thing. Brooms, swords.
Besoms.
What?
Besom, right? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes. Besom with a B.
Besom. Yeah.
Besom. The very Besom, the very besom of destruction. Right. The besom, which is the broom of fire, which sweeps the earth clean. And we were seeing literal, actual historical examples of that in our immersion into these great firestorm stories. Oh, yeah. The idea of the broom certainly is appropriate. And I've always liked the Mawangdui, whatever, I'm probably horribly mispronouncing it, the silk from China, with the various commentary forms and the disasters associated with them, compiled somewhere around 400 BC. Maybe I should do a share screen on this one. I think I will. Are you seeing the...
Yep.
Yeah, good. These are some interesting forms when you start looking at them. I like the showing that, these multiple tails, and there's a remarkable similarity. Maybe you guys pointed this out. Remarkable similarity between these Chinese depictions of comets and some of the petroglyphs we see in the Southwest.
That was Peter pointed that out.
That was Peter, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah, that's a really interesting association there to me. Because, you see almost some of the figures etched into these walls, pecked into the walls, are very similar to what we're looking at right here.
Very similar. Absolutely.
Yes. There should be another one here. Yeah. This is the last 7 comets. Look at this one over here. Carl Sagan was speculating that perhaps a whirling comet nucleus was with these the jet trails coming out might have been the origin of the swastika, which perhaps it does.
I think I also did mention this after Peter made that connection, but this also looks like the Paracas candelabra in Peru.
Ah, okay. I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, a huge geoglyph down in Peru. Maybe I can find a picture and we can share it later.
Okay. So in the book, The Star of Bethlehem, in the journal Science and Christian Belief, Volume 5, October 1995, he's referring Colin Humphreys. The Chinese kept careful astronomical records of visible comets, nova, etc., and used different terms to describe them. A tailed comet was called Sui Sing, maybe, meaning a broom star. The broom referring to the tail of the comet. So
either they've been watching and tracking things for a really long time, or there was a period when the sky was a lot more busy with these things incoming.
Exactly.
Right, to have all these different designs. And that experience has to go way back.
Yep. Yeah, it has to. And so let's see, what else can we look at here? Okay, one more here. Yeah. From the Chinese document Record of the World's Change, quoted in Sagan and Durian, 602-667 AD, the broom star. Here's the idea of the broom star. A comet has a long tail and is thus commonly called a broom star. The ancients believed it was a symbol of war and calamity. Their appearances heralded wars and disasters for humankind, and ancient people were afraid of seeing them. People who bring misfortune or bad luck may also be called broom stars. And then the next image is an Iron Age spear that was made out of meteoritic iron.
Oh, man. Look at that.
Yeah.
Got the
definitely has the symbols.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, when you see a spear made out of meteoritic iron, and it's got those symbols carved in it.
Yep.
I mean, it's hard.
Very suggestive.
It looks like the one on the lower right of the blade is a serpent.
It does, doesn't it? And then look at this. Let me see it right here. Is that possibly showing like
fragmentation?
A fragmentation event?
The Elohim.
Mm-hmm. Huh.
Well, those are yuds.
Yeah.
The yuds.
Yuds. Oh, those are the little yuds. Yeah. So, yes, from the Meteorological Journal in 1841, contributions towards a history of the star showers in former times. In the year AD 764, in the same year, in the month of March, stars were seen falling from heaven, so that all the beholders imagined that the end of the world had come. There was also a great drought, and the fountains were dried up. This is from the Chronographia by Stephanus in the history of Byzantium. So interesting stuff. AD 855. October 17th. This year, this is from the Tarish el-Mansuri Codex 521, Folio 51. It's now in the Museum of the L'Institut Paris. This year, there was a fall of stars during the night preceding the first day of the month. which was Hegira 241, which continued from the beginning of the night until dawn. And at the same period, earthquakes were felt in all parts of the world. Could this be implying perhaps a correlation between impact type events and earthquakes? Why not? AD 899, November 14th, in the year 286 of the Hegira, there was an earthquake in Egypt. On Wednesday, the 7th of the month, Jolkada, from midnight until morning, and the stars called Shuhub, luminous meteors, were in extraordinary commotion, going from east to west and from north to south in such a manner that no mortal could look at the heavens. AD 931 or 934, the same year. Now, this is from the notes found on a calendar and printed at the end of Chronicon Cavense in the Rerum Italicarum Scriptoris. It was published in 1723, page 961. In the same year, 934, appeared signs in the heavens among the stars, which appeared some falling, others blazing like torches on the 14th day of October, the second day of the moon. AD 935, in the year 323, several violent shocks of an earthquake were felt in Egypt. The third of Dul-Qada, which would have been our October 5th AD, about the same time, many of those meteors called falling stars of a very remarkable kind likewise appeared in Egypt. So, I mean, the point here is we could go on and we'll find an interesting, very interesting correlation to me, that oftentimes events that would normally be considered exclusively terrestrial, even droughts, but earthquakes, right? Other climatic and weather phenomena often are associated with meteor showers and impact type events.
You want me to share this giant geoglyph real quick?
Sure, please.
Yeah. Look at that thing.
Oh, yeah. Look, yeah. No kidding.
That's a huge glyph off the coast of Peru. I mean, it's absolutely enormous on the mountains there. No one really knows who made it or how old it is, you know.
Wow.
I think that's near the Atacama Desert also.
Yeah.
Is that sandstone? What is that?
Oh, what, down below it?
No, the mountain itself. What's it carved into?
I don't know. It's like a desert material, but it's you know, like I said, the thing is gigantic. You can kind of see the little path coming down next to it off to the left there. But I haven't been there yet. We're planning on going someday. I don't know.
Oh, this Sunday? You're going to stop over here on your way to Montana?
Yeah, just check it out on Sunday. No, someday is what I meant.
Oh, someday.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, when you show those, you know, those comet drawings, it just reminds me of that. And no one, you know, it's like it's a question on what it means, but once you showed those, I was like, oh man, I wonder if they're drawing a huge glyph of something they saw in the sky.
Well, let's see how much time we got left.
It's a good time to wind it down.
Okay, let me close with this. This is now from actually NASA website talking about comets. Comets have inspired dread, fear, and awe in many different cultures and societies around the world. And throughout time, they have been branded with such titles as the harbinger of doom and the menace of the universe. They have been regarded both as omens of disaster and messengers of the gods. Why is it that comets are some of the most feared and venerated objects in the night sky? Why did so many cultures cringe at the sight of a comet? Well, I don't think we have to reach too far to come up with the answer to that. do we? Goes on to say, what were the gods trying to say? Some cultures read the message by the images that they saw upon looking at the comet. For example, to some cultures, the tail of the comet gave it the appearance of the head of a woman with long flowing hair behind her. This sorrowful symbol of mourning was understood to mean the gods that had sent the comet to Earth were displeased. Others thought that the elongated comet looked like a fiery sword blazing across the night sky, a traditional sign of war and death. Such a message from the gods could only mean that their wrath would soon be unleashed onto the people of the land. Such ideas struck fear into those who saw comets dart across the sky. The likeness of the comet, though, was not the only thing that inspired fear. Ancient cultural legends also played a hand in inspiring a terrible dread of these celestial nomads. The Roman prophecies, the Sibylline oracles, spoke of a great conflagration from the sky falling to earth. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? While the most ancient known mythology, the Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh, described fire, brimstone, and flood with the arrival of a comet. Now this is a very interesting correlation. Rabbi Moses ben Nachman, a Jew living in Spain, wrote, he's writing of a Jewish legend, which you can find in the lore of ancient Judaism, right? He wrote of God taking 2 stars from Chema and throwing them at the earth in order to begin the great flood. However, what's not said here is Chema was their name for what?
I don't know that one.
Give you one guess.
What, the firmament? I don't know.
That's too general.
Okay.
Chema. I bet you, Kyle, look it up. Chema, Hebrew, meaning, the word, you can spell it Khima, capital K, and let's see what it says. So how interesting. God takes 2 stars from Chema, throws them at the earth, and that's what begins the great flood. Then you had the Yakut.
A cluster of stars.
A cluster of stars. Any specific cluster of stars?
Ooh, I bet I know which one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Pleiades.
Mm-hmm. Took a couple of stars out of the Pleiades, threw them at the earth, and that's what started the great flood.
Wow.
And the Pleiades is, of course,
the shoulder of the bull. Yakut legend in ancient Mongolia called comets the daughter of the devil. And warned of destruction, storm, and frost whenever she approaches the earth. Stories associating comets with such terrible imagery are at the base of so many cultures on Earth and fuel a dread that followed comet sightings throughout history. Unlike their Western counterparts, Chinese astronomers kept extensive records on the appearances, paths, and disappearances of hundreds of comets. Extensive comet atlases have been found dating back to the Han Dynasty, which described comets as long-tailed pheasant stars or broom stars and associate the different cometary forms with different disasters. Although most human beings no longer cringe at the sight of a comet, they still inspire fear everywhere around the globe, from Hollywood to doomsday cults. The United States even set up a near-Earth asteroid tracking program specifically to guard us from these divine dangers. However, although they were once regarded as omens of disaster and messengers of the gods, today a scientific approach has helped allay such concerns. Oh, has it? Has it? Or has it in fact confirmed some of the ancient fears? Yeah. So anyways, I want to close with a image, but let's just take a brief moment to summarize some of the imagery that we have associated with the comet in our little discourse during this class. Swords, lances, torches, that's a prominent one, brooms, what else?
Serpents, dragons.
Serpents, dragons were clearly the most prominent. And then the literal meaning of the word komata itself, long-haired.
Oh, yes.
And remember, associated with the symbol of mourning. Mourning, not mourning like AM, but mourning.
It's sad, yeah.
Sad, yes. So now I want to look at this picture that's very prominent within Freemasonry. We'll of course be coming back to this image because I think it's so interesting and suggestive. Something else that we didn't cover in this particular discussion was the usage of the representation of the fireball or the comet as a scythe or a sickle.
Yeah.
But again, the idea there is it not only gives the appearance of a sickle in the sky, particularly of the long curved tail, but the idea of, the god reaching in and harvesting the earth by means of the scythe. And notice this is the god Saturn or time. And what's he doing? He's plaiting or braiding the long hair of this mourning woman. In her right hand, she holds the acacia branch. In her left hand, look what she's got. The censer. The censer, yes. On the broken column is an open book, and there's your broken column. Right here, down inconspicuously, is the hourglass marking the passage of time. And when you start putting this all together, what comes up here is not some superstitious figure of ancient, illiterate human imagination, but something I think profoundly meaningful. The other interpretation of the censer in her hand is also when you remove the top, you've got the chalice.
It's the grail, yeah.
It's the grail. Yes.
And also, it's interesting how the way he's holding her hair kind of represents the breaking up of the comet and the tail.
Yeah.
They're
and
in two
tail.
different directions.
And
Yeah.
of course, he's bearded, which is also another, these
Yes.
the bearded
Bearded,
stars.
yep.
The bearded. Exactly.
Sorry, Mike. What?
I was going to say, are you sure that's a censer or is it a ciborium?
Well, see there, we get into that, is it a matter of either or, one or the other? I mean, it has the exact look really of both of them. I don't know. I would say it's probably, that the censer
or even a chalice, the way, because it's got a long handle.
Exactly. That's what I was pointing out. If you take the top away, you have a chalice, a cup with a long.
Yeah.
So I would say it could probably.
And the collapsed column is like civilization.
Yes,
it's going down.
That's what it is. Exactly. Yeah. She's weeping and mourning over the destruction.
But the book is open. The book is open, and our own Kronos has his hat on, so we got to end this show.
Right. Where is this image from?
This is Masonic.
Okay, what era? I mean, is it? Looks fairly,
probably
looks like 1800s.
I would say 1800s.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome stuff, man. Love it.
Yeah, fantastic, Randall. Great.
Oh, thanks,
Great
guys.
show.
Delivering more than expected once again.
I was just looking at the Ace of Swords too. Maybe we could look at that next time.
Well, we'll pick up with that next time. Let's do. I think that would be because we've got a lot more here.
All right.
We could
This is
easily
great
keep
stuff.
going for another hour. And I love these old accounts.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah.
More lore.
More lore.
Brad,
Yeah, excellent.
anything we want to add? All the stuff will be in the show notes, randallcarlson.com. Get your merch there. Check out for the trips. Or check out contactatthecabin.com.
More Scablands trips coming up in September, and we're getting the Sanctuary project cranked up and moving forward. And yeah, more information coming out on that. It's going to have its own newsletter. So you didn't see Randall on Joe Rogan on February. Check that out and learn a little bit. And we got a new webpage coming up, and yeah, that's really starting to get some traction. So more of that coming soon.
All right.
Yep. All right, guys.
Good night. Excellent
Good to
show,
see you, and
gentlemen.
I'm looking forward to hanging with you guys next week.
Yeah.
Heck yeah, man. Likewise.
Oh yeah,
Last week.
Yeah, good.
last week. Yeah, I'm looking forward to
It
hanging
was
out with
great
you guys
time hanging
last
with you.
week.
We had a
So
great time.
okay.
Awesome, Randall.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.